There's a lot of memes about philosophy making people depressed.
Yeah.
That the more that you learn, the worse that you see the world. What's the darkest philosophies that you guys have been exposed to?
Turan?
I mean, I love Turan. I think that Turan is incredibly underrated, kind of Romanian stroke French. Wrote lots of his work in French, but was Romanian, kind of adopted France in his later years.
Well, that'll make you depressed straight off the bat.
Well, potentially. And Turan...
Emile Turan.
Yes, Emile Turan writes these incredibly pessimistic tracts of philosophy. One's called The Trouble with Being Born, another's called A Short History of Decay. And he is kind of incredibly...
Love him already.
His first book...
You sure he's not British?
Well, it's. I don't know if it's just because I'm British that it kind of, I like it so much. His first book is called On the Heights of Despair. It's, truly melodramatic
Sanguine
stuff.
shit, yeah.
One of the things that I find very interesting about philosophies that are supposedly dark, and I'm specifically thinking of the pessimistic philosophies here, people like Schopenhauer and Turan, maybe to a lesser extent someone like Philip Mainlander. I don't know, this is something I think Turan is so good at, is that oftentimes when you're reading him, he's very good at subtly shifting the scope, so that you're reading him and he's complaining about life. His view on life is far more pessimistic than Mike's view on life. Is there's kind of the characteristic property of life is suffering for a variety of reasons, but he occasionally just this kind of dark pessimistic outlook breaks through into a kind of natural lightheartedness that I think is absolutely amazing. So one of the things that is interesting, I say, about reading a pessimistic philosopher is that if, and I think that nihilism to a certain extent shares this, provided that it's kind of framed in a certain way, is that if, you're not expecting things to go very well, and if you think the characteristic property of the world is meaningless suffering, well then, to a certain extent, like the stakes are kind of lowered. It's very similar, I suppose, to that advice that Seneca gave in one of his letters, which is to kind of imagine how things are going to go horribly wrong, so that you feel much better when it comes to it.
Low expectations.
Yes, yeah. And I think that on a kind of existential level, reading an incredibly darkly pessimistic philosopher, sort of, as I say, there is sometimes a moment where it breaks through. I suppose the only way I could kind of try and contextualize this is like, have you ever had an astonishingly bad day, just like a comedically bad day? And I do mean like comedic, and you get to like 5 o'clock and, you've been mugged 7 times and a car drives by and it kicks up a puddle of dog shit over your nice suit or whatever. And you can't help but just laugh. Because at that point it's like, oh wow, like this has become funny. And I think that's something that Turan is very, very good at. And that's why, I often talk about him as one of the darkest philosophers of all time. He's also one of the funniest, one of the few philosophers where you can read him and laugh out loud.
It is hilarious that suffering is dose dependent in that way.
Yeah.
Like your response to it, a U-shaped curve. It's like too little, everything's probably okay. A bit, oh god, this sucks. And then too much, it's okay again.
It always leads to frivolity, right? And that makes it livable. I do think sometimes the more pessimistic philosophers can be a little bit self-indulgent. It's a bit sort of, woe is me. Oh, like because, I don't know.
How sophisticated my thoughts.
Yeah.
How deep my engagement with the world is.
When actually you just like, you got dumped by your girlfriend and now you're writing about how terrible life is.
I mean, look, I asked Joe this the last time that we sat down. I often think philosophy is just clever branding for depressive thoughts.
It often is, but it's also often just clever branding for like any kind of thought. I think it's like you literally just have a thought and you try to systematize it, right? This is why the greatest philosophers, another thing we said before we started, tell you something you already know. If you open Wittgenstein's Tractus, the first line of the introduction is something like, I don't think this book will be useful except to anybody who's already like in agreement with the things that it says. It's just supposed to be sort of elucidating an idea. And so, yeah, a lot of the time it is just sort of feeling out a vibe, finding someone who puts it into good words and saying, oh, I think that person's very smart.
That resonates with me. I feel less alone.
By the way, is why when people ask me for like a recommendation of what philosophy to read or something, if someone says, where should I start with philosophy? You might be tempted to say, okay, well, let's start with Plato, read about Socrates and Aristotle, then do a bit of existentialist philosophy. I just tell people, just literally read what you've heard of. And the reason for that is because these people will have come up in contexts that are relevant to you or of interest to you, right? So if you've heard Nietzsche mentioned a bunch of times because you're a big Jordan Peterson fan, like if you like Jordan Peterson, and Jordan Peterson obviously likes Nietzsche quite a lot and finds a lot of use in him, you're probably going to find some use in him. Whereas if you just randomly pick one of the great philosophers, like if you just pick up Sartre, as I did the other day, I told you this, and read Existentialism as a Humanism and think, this is complete nonsense, that was a complete waste of time, because you're not going to resonate with it. It's not going to, strictly speaking, convince you unless I think you've already got sort of one foot in the boat. I did think on the pessimistic philosophers, or you said the darkest philosophers, which doesn't necessarily mean pessimistic, right?
Dark philosophy, pessimistic philosophy, whatever.
I think Schopenhauer comes to mind. He's writing his On the Sufferings of the World. That's your sort of indulgent pessimist. I think he had trouble with women for some of his life, and he's got this infamous essay on women, which would read like a comedy. In fact, one version of his essays I have in the introduction or the preface, the translator says, by the way, the essay on women isn't a joke. He's not being sarcastic. This is what he actually thought. He comes to mind.
It's an irony disclaimer.
Yeah. But in order to sort of avoid that, I think that a good example of a potentially non-self-indulgent pessimistic philosophy that seems genuinely just philosophical might be something like antinatalism, the view that it is immoral to have children. David Benatar is the sort of superstar of antinatalism. He wrote a book called Better Never to Have Been, which sounds like one of these sort of, I'm about to write about how terrible life is, I wish I was never born. But it's not. It's like, philosophically speaking, he tries to make a case that it's just better for no one to be born. Even if their life is filled with more pleasure than suffering, he thinks that it's still immoral to bring them into existence. It's an interesting take.
We had a debate about this 5 years ago in the Barbican.
That sounds about right. Yeah. When we first met.
Like canteen
at
the Barbican. And we were having the conversation. And people came, tried to be social, listened for 5 minutes, and then left. And there was just this sort of steady cycle of people coming and going. This doesn't sound very nice at all. So yeah, Benatar actually probably does fit.
A good example of why you might find it dark. I mean, I call it dark if you like. I mean, for an antinatalist, they'll say, no, the darkness is that you're, unconsensually bringing people into suffering. That's the representation of. But in terms of how it's perceived, I think that as far as pessimism goes, the idea that it's immoral to have children. I mean, you've heard of like the pro-life and the pro-choice crowd. Benatar and his crew are like anti-life. Like it's like this sort of third option that everybody forgets about. He's got some wonderful sort of little tidbits in there. He takes a divergence into the philosophy of disability for a time, sort of making a case that in principle we are all disabled in some philosophical sense.
How so? Are we all disabled?
It's been a while since I've read it, but I think he sort of imagined. So one way of thinking about this would be like, imagine if everybody whose legs worked suddenly just died, and the only people left on planet Earth like don't have functioning legs. Maybe not instantly, because people would have memory, but after not very long, it just wouldn't be considered a disability to not have legs, because that's just how everybody is. And Benatar sort of imagines, in principle, the things that we could have that we don't, which means that in principle we are disabled in the same way. We just
can't fly.
So there are all kinds of sufferings that come about in our life, like having to climb the stairs, which we don't even notice as sufferings. And if you add all of these up, they become pretty significant. It's a bit of a trip, but really interesting, and I think probably dark.
The other thing that's quite nice about Benatar, I said it was sort of dry earlier, and I did mean that as a compliment. Sorry, it's
as opposed to like frilly.
Yes, is that Benatar is very. He gives a very logical argument, as in there I would say there are problems with the argument, but as in like it's very clearly laid out in a way that quite a lot of pessimistic philosophers write in sort of semi poetry. Benatar, if you're a hardcore analytic fan. He's probably the pessimist you're going to enjoy.
Seems that way, I suppose.
You spoke to him, right?
I did. I had him on my show. He doesn't show his face. Yeah, he doesn't. I actually don't know if he uses his real name, but he doesn't show his face. So there is also that added element that he doesn't want to be seen.
Oh, so he's the sleep token of the philosophy world.
Oh, are they the mask-wearing Slipknot?
Yeah, Joe, don't make that face.
No, sorry, no. So I don't.
It's very, very cool, very popular. But this, when you guys start telling me about, Anistatis of ancient Scythia, and I go, oh yeah, and I need to nod along like this. This is your turn.
Oh yeah.
Okay, there we are. Thank you. Very good.
What's the philosophy of sleep token?
If you go on the Reddit, really deep. really, really, really deep. The lore goes hard.
The lore goes hard on many subreddits. I have a subreddit too, which has some interesting laws of its own.
I've seen them.
I think. Oh yeah,
I've seen them. Yeah, you've got canon.
Yeah, apparently so.
If you haven't been feeling as sharp or energized as you'd like, getting your blood work done is the best place to start, which is why I partnered with Function. They run lab tests twice a year that monitor over 100 biomarkers. They've got a team of expert physicians that take the data, put it in a simple dashboard, and give you actionable insights and recommendations to improve your health and lifespan. They track everything from your heart health to your hormone levels to your thyroid function and nutrient deficiencies. They even screen for 50 types of cancer at stage 1, which is 5 times more data than you get from an annual physical. And getting your blood work done and drawn and analyzed like this would usually cost thousands, but with Function, it is only $499. And right now, they're giving 1,000 Modern Wisdom listeners another $100 off, bringing it down to $399. So just go to the link in the description below or head to functionhealth.com/modernwisdom. That's functionhealth.com/modernwisdom. Thank you very much for tuning in. Ooh, a tasty morsel of a conversation for you there. Well, full meal available right here. Go on. Press it.